Good evening. Yes, I know it's complicated. If you're discussing it over dinner, you probably give up after 10 minutes. But in essence, what is it all about? It's about Christopher Berry, an academic, Christopher Cash, a former parliamentary researcher. They were charged under the Official Secrets Act of 1911 of acting and providing information that was prejudicial to the safety and interests of the state. And yet, in September, the Director of Public Prosecutions decided to drop the case and not move ahead. Now, we're told this is all because the Deputy National Security Advisor, a man called Matt Collins, a civil servant, put in some written words suggesting that basically their behaviour didn't meet the bar for a prosecution. That kind of gets to the heart of what was discussed at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday. And this was the last question that Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, asked. And I think this perhaps forms the kernel.
Right, so picture this. The Labour government is about to hand over a chunk of prime London real estate to the Chinese Communist Party for what critics are calling the biggest spy operation in European history. And here's the kicker. It's going to sit practically on top of the financial data cables that run Britain's economy. What could possibly go wrong? Spoiler alert, absolutely everything. Before we dive into this absolute shambles, do us a favor, would you? If you're finding this interesting, smash that subscribe button. Over 94% of you watching haven't subscribed yet. It's completely free, takes literally 2 seconds, and genuinely helps us keep bringing you these stories. Cheers to those who already have. Right, let's get stuck in. Now, we've seen some questionable decisions come out of Westminster over the years, haven't we? Brexit negotiations that went nowhere, expenses scandals that made our blood boil, prime ministers resigning faster than you can say lettuce, but this might just take the biscuit. Labour is genuinely considering approving plans for what would become the largest Chinese embassy in all of Europe, slap bang in the heart of London's financial district. And we're not talking about some modest diplomatic outpost here. We're talking about a sprawling mega complex that would make James Bond villains jealous. Danny Kruger, the Reform UK MP who's been leading the charge against this monstrosity, didn't mince his words when he spoke to GB News. He called it disgraceful, and honestly, that might be the understatement of the century. The man joined masses of protesters in the capital, all rallying against what he's branded a huge new spy base. And when you look at the details, you start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he's got a point. The Telegraph, bless them, managed to get their hands on unredacted development plans, and what they revealed should send shivers down the spine of anyone who cares about British national security. These drawings showed an underground room, right? Perfectly normal for an embassy, you might think, except this particular underground room is going to be built absurdly close to some rather sensitive fibre-optic cables. Not just any old cables, mind you. These bad boys carry financial information and data to and from the City of London. You know, the place that basically keeps the British economy ticking over. The sheer proximity has got security experts clutching their pearls, and frankly, who can blame them? Now, let's talk about who we're actually dealing with here, shall we? Because context matters. Danny Kruger didn't hold back when describing the Chinese regime. He called it the worst regime in the world in terms of what it's doing to its own people and the abuse and oppression that happens in China. Strong words, but are they wrong? This is the same government that's been accused of mass surveillance of its own population, the systematic oppression of Uyghur Muslims, the crushing of democracy in Hong Kong, and don't even get me started on their approach to Tibet. Human rights organizations have been sounding alarm bells for decades, but apparently that's all water under the bridge when there's money to be made. But here's where it gets properly concerning. Kruger pointed out the role China plays in destabilizing the world. We're talking about their cozy relationship with Russia, the regime that decided to invade Ukraine. Their support for Iran, a country that's hardly known for its progressive values. And let's not forget their friendship with North Korea, where Kim Jong-un runs what's essentially a nuclear-armed prison state. These are China's mates, the countries they prop up and support, and we're about to give them the biggest embassy in Europe. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? The technology angle is what should really keep you up at night, though. Kruger warned about what China is already doing with technology and what they're planning. This isn't some far-fetched conspiracy theory. We've seen Chinese tech companies banned from Western infrastructure projects because of legitimate security concerns. Huawei, anyone? Remember that whole debacle? Countries across the world have been ripping out Chinese-made equipment from their telecommunications networks because experts concluded the risk was too great. And now we're going to plonk down a massive Chinese government facility right next to crucial internet infrastructure. The irony would be hilarious if it weren't so terrifying. This proposed embassy would be an enormous operation for spying on Britain and other countries. Danny Kruger used the word dystopian, and honestly, it's hard to disagree. Picture this: hundreds of Chinese government officials operating out of the largest embassy in Europe, sitting on top of cables that carry financial data worth billions. It's like inviting a fox into a hen house, giving it a map of where all the chickens sleep, and then acting surprised when eggs start going missing. So why on earth would the Labour government even consider this absolute nightmare? Well, according to Kruger, it all comes down to what he rather colourfully described as grubby commercial deals. He reckons Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer think they need to cozy up to China to get Britain growing again. Classic short-term thinking, really. Trade the family silver for a quick economic boost and hope nobody notices the massive security hole you've just blown in the country's defences. But here's the thing that should make every British citizen absolutely furious. It hasn't even worked. Kruger pointed out that all our cozying up to China for the last decade has achieved precisely nothing in terms of sustainable economic growth. We've been bending over backwards to accommodate Chinese investment, and what have we got to show for it? A property market inflated by foreign money, critical infrastructure owned by companies with ties to the Chinese state, and now potentially the world's most sophisticated spy operation right in our capital.
Leader Sir Ed Davey said we must never allow this to happen again, and called for the law to be changed so ministers cannot simply delay elections at the stroke of a pen. That's actually a substantive policy proposal. That's saying, regardless of who's in government, this power should not exist or should be severely restricted. And you know what? He's absolutely right. The fact that a government minister can unilaterally decide to postpone elections should worry everyone, regardless of their political affiliation. Today, it might be Labour using this power when they're unpopular. Tomorrow, it could be the Conservatives. The day after, it could be whoever else manages to win power. The principle matters more than the party. Even the Electoral Commission, the independent body responsible for overseeing elections in the UK, has raised concerns about these delays. They've outlined that the power to postpone elections should only be used in exceptional circumstances, like the COVID pandemic. And they've questioned whether a local government reorganisation meets that threshold. Think about that for a moment. The official electoral watchdog, the people whose literal job is to ensure fair and proper elections, are saying, hang on, this doesn't seem right. That's not partisan opposition, that's professional concern from the experts who understand how democracy is supposed to function. And here's what makes this entire situation even more galling. This is the second year in a row that local elections have been delayed. The government did this last year, they're doing it again this year, and there's absolutely nothing stopping them from doing it again next year, if it's still politically convenient. We're establishing a precedent here, a dangerous one, where elections can be postponed whenever the government decides it's a bit awkward to hold them. That's not how democracies are supposed to work. Elections are meant to be fixed, predictable, unavoidable. They're meant to be the mechanism through which politicians are held accountable whether they like it or not. Let's talk about what this means for the actual people affected. Because 4 million Britons aren't just statistics, they're real people with real concerns about their local areas who are being denied the opportunity to have their say.
Some of these councillors will now be serving 7-year terms. 7 years! That's longer than most parliamentary terms. That's longer than many people stay in the same job or the same house. That's an entire generation of primary school children going from reception to year 6 without their local councillors facing re-election. How can anyone pretend that's democratic? How can anyone claim with a straight face that this is just about administrative convenience? And let's consider the timing, because it's rather suspicious, isn't it? Labour are currently experiencing what can only be described as a polling catastrophe. They won a massive majority in the last general election, partly because the Conservative vote collapsed, and partly because of widespread desire for change after years of Tory government. But since taking power, they've struggled to maintain popular support. Various policy decisions, economic challenges, and internal party tensions have led to approval ratings that would make even Liz Truss blush. And now, facing local elections where they were expected to lose significant numbers of council seats, suddenly there's an urgent need to postpone democracy. The optics are absolutely terrible. Now, the government would argue, and probably will argue, that they're caught in an impossible situation. If they proceed with elections whilst restructuring local government, voters might be confused about what they're voting for, what areas their councillors will represent, and how the new structures will work. That confusion could lead to lower turnout, spoiled ballots, and general chaos. Better, they'd say, to postpone until everything is sorted and voters can make informed decisions. That argument has some merit, genuinely it does. But here's the counter-argument. If the restructuring is creating such chaos that elections cannot be held, perhaps the problem is the restructuring, not the elections. Perhaps the government should have planned this better, should have timed things differently, should have ensured that democratic processes could continue uninterrupted whilst administrative changes happened in the background. There's also a broader question about what message this sends to the British public about their democracy.